thank you very much to RIA and to the Strictly TPA Fall Summit for inviting me electronically to give a summary and insight into what the Property Insurance and Restoration Conference is. I'm Jordan Hendler. I'm the PIRC organizer. And the first question I know that everybody would have is, what is PIRC, or what is the Property Insurance and Restoration Conference? So it's a unique conference. It's held for the restoration industry and for all segments. It's meant to be really interactive and discussion-based for all the attendees. And, you know, a lot of conferences in a lot of industries, and this goes back to my background, which I'll get to, are used to participating in a learning type environment where you sit as an attendee and information is projected at you, and it's not really a two-way street or open dialogue type of environment. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because there's definitely not, and everybody definitely gains many benefits from those types of conferences and meetings. But this format's definitely meant to have topic-led discussions that are all industry segments, and what it does, the purpose is to identify issues or pain points in the industry and give them transparency and also possible solutions where applicable. So in addition to the information that's on the screen, I'll start with, who am I? And I'm Jordan Hendler, and Jeff Hendler is the co-organizer of PIRC. And the first question is, you know, we're not in the property restoration industry. We actually come from the collision industry. And how is that relevant to you? So we started, or I will start with, Jeff started, along with several other members of the collision industry back in the early 80s, the Collision Industry Conference. And what that is would be a parallel type conference to what we're trying to start here, that brought all segments of the collision industry together to discuss issues for their industry. When I say all segments, I mean repairers, I mean car manufacturers, insurers, vendors, equipment suppliers, paint manufacturers. Every possible segment, even rental car companies, is represented in the CIC room, the Collision Industry Conference. And over the years, that conference grew from 20-some to start out with attendees into the hundreds, and as of late, it's closer to around 400 attendees representing all segments of the industry. The type of forum that it is that they have an agenda of all different types of topics, from vehicle technologies, parts procurement, parts issues, database enhancement, estimating resolutions, insurer-repairer relations task force. There's a lot of different objectives to the meeting, and there's large committees that work on these issues and bring forth information as far as solutions, or they bring transparency by bringing experts into the room. There's a lot of dialogue that happens from the floor to the stage, and that could be through panel discussions where audience is participatory the entire time. That can also be where experts are brought in and questions are asked of them. So it's definitely all about open dialogue and attendee participation, and the ability for attendees to bring up their own issues to any respective committee that it applies. So that's a really important factor for PIRC, and where we hope that it will go is that this is a place any segment of the industry could bring their, we like to use the word pain point, which doesn't mean as negatively as I think people can initially think. What it really means is to give it transparency, to give it opportunity for us to facilitate the solutions or possible solutions, or even just recommendations to the rest of the industry as far as reducing that pain point for those segments involved. And again, it's all about positive discussions and positive resolutions, everybody working together towards a common goal. And the goal of PIRC, speaking of goals, is here is our mission, our vision, and this is really important. When we started with CIC, the Collision Industry Conference, and there would be attendees who would bring issues to the forefront or bring their own personal agendas to the forefront. And we would constantly remind ourselves, and this comes up almost at every meeting still, almost 40 years later, where we have to go back to, is this part of our mission and vision for what we think that CIC should be? So on that same parallel, for PIRC, we want to make sure that we're, number one, positively affecting issues in the industry for all stakeholders, and that the discussion brings transparency, that we find the common ground, and that we find these possible solutions or best practices to improve the industry. And when you talk about best practices, sometimes that can be confusing. So a couple of examples that CIC has worked on that I think are really parallel for the property insurance and restoration industries is things like parts procurement. There was a lot of advancement in electronic procurement of parts for collision repair, which is probably a similar practice in restoration. And we built these parts matrix for the collision industry that showed all these different websites that repairers could source parts and what were some of the drawbacks or pros and cons, in other words, of these systems. And those were communicated to the body and used by both parts procurement companies to improve themselves, insurers to communicate with their partners as to how best source parts that would make it easier, and the repairers also found it easier to choose potential vendors for their parts procurement online sources. Another example of that would be digital imaging for estimating. I understand that in the restoration industry, having a common SOP or standard practice for digital imaging is potentially a need for clarification. And those are just two small examples, and definitely advancements in technologies is another parallel between automotive and automotive repair and home repair. So those are just a couple of examples of things that we have done on the collision side that could be hugely beneficial to the restoration industry and all segments involved. And then to the vision here, the goal, end game for all parties involved is a sustainable property insurance and restoration industry in which all segments work together to enable a complete, safe, timely, and quality restoration. And I think with that vision in mind is where we really can affect positively reducing some of the pain that segments experience interacting with each other. So, as for our next meeting, which is very soon, just a few days away, it will be in Fort Worth at the Sheraton downtown. It's held just before the PLRB Large Loss Conference, but this is definitely one opportunity we'd love to see everyone at, but at the same time know that that's a very tight turnaround. If you're not planning on attending, watch your email box news sources for the next meeting. You can also go to the website, go to PIRC.com, and our schedule will be posted. You can also communicate your information to us, and we'd be happy to add you onto our email list so that you can not only get the meeting information, but as information comes out from the organization, you would be on the first to know basis. So as far as what is PIRC, where do we think we're going, again, we really do believe that this is a unique conference and that all segments will benefit from it for the entirety of the restoration industry. And we really, again, appreciate the opportunity to share about our meeting here. And we would welcome any questions from the audience. We, again, thank you to RIA, and I will give it over to Jacqueline Carpenter for any questions from the audience. And if there's any further questions, I can be reached here at the website. This is our office number, my email, which are also on the website. and I can take you right over to the website so you can see what it looks like, which is go to PIRC.com. And we, again, thank you and welcome any questions.